Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Communitech Data Hub, and welcome to our viewers online as well. My name is Vladimir, and I'm part of the Communitech team. So before we begin today, I'd like to take a bit of time to tell you a bit more about some of the services that we have available here at the Communitech Data Hub. So how do we help? We do so through informative and data-focused awareness initiatives such as the Data Hub sessions like today, as well as smaller, more tactical Data Hub workshops. We also help companies find and leverage data sets through the Data Concierge service and the Data Growth Coach program. And we also help a number of companies. We do like matchmaking events for them, basically where we connect some of the startups in the area, so the SMEs, to a larger enterprise there as well to see if there is a B2B fit essentially for some of the services that they're working on. Today's topic on data privacy and cybersecurity is a very important subject, and our data growth coaches are here to help companies navigate that landscape. So what is a data growth coach? So basically, a data growth coach is here to they're available to spend a couple of hours there with each of the companies around a subject that is important to them. So for example, in terms of the subjects that we'd be covering today, we would have a data growth coach that is available to talk about, for example, data strategy, data management, data licensing, data government, etc. And if you'd like to know more, you can reach us. And with that said, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, which is Ivan Serrani. So Ivan is the CEO and co-founder of Ferroot, a company that works with security, privacy, and data protection departments to make websites more secure. Having previously co-founded PostBeyond, a revolutionary communication tool for marketing professionals, Ivan is well aware of the growing need in sales and marketing departments to track and analyze customer and user behavior, and via third-party tools such as web trackers, analytics, and tag managers. As a co-founder of Ferroot, Ivan hopes to make it easier for security and privacy teams to collaborate with marketing, products, and sales, and gain visibility into potential security risks and vulnerabilities introduced by the third-party and fourth-party tools. Ultimately, his goal is to turn privacy and security compliance from a liability into a competitive advantage. Everyone, please welcome Ivan.
Thank you. That was a lengthy introduction. Thank you very much, and really appreciate being invited here and share our experience with some of the things that we noticed, and hopefully some of it, if not all of it, might resonate or will be helpful. Ironically, I was here giving a talk about GDPR and privacy exactly a year ago, and it's very interesting to see what had happened over the last 12 months and how does it impact us as tech companies, as data-hungry companies, as startups, and what lessons we can learn from it. And I'm curious, just by raise of hand, let's see what kind of companies do we represent mostly here in the room. Is it, raise your hand if you're working for a startup or a part of a startup, let's say under like 50 employees, like from 50 to 500 size? Almost nobody. Large enterprises? Okay, so under 50 employees. Very, very topical, very interesting segment. What we'll do is first jump into a couple of recaps, and it might look scary or you might have seen it before, but some of the learnings from privacy regulations such as GDPR is that the biggest fines so far have been not because of privacy violations, but because of lack of security measures in place. Like in British Airways, $230 million US dollar fine, which translates to roughly 1.5% of global revenue. Marriott, another big fine as well. Ticketmaster was it's still to be decided what the penalty will be, but it was a textbook example. Big e-commerce company, big mature e-commerce site with lots of transactions, very mature cybersecurity practice and privacy practice in place. Yet, a chatbot that was active on their page to serve customers was from a startup that didn't have a mature cybersecurity practice, didn't have mature privacy practice in place, didn't have all the things that Ticketmaster had. And what hackers are looking for, they're looking for the path of least resistance. They are looking for a backdoor. Why go through the front door that has all the armor plating on it if you don't even have a backdoor, there's just a hole in the wall. That was an interesting example. Anyone heard of Tio Networks? It was a Vancouver-based fintech acquired by PayPal. And PayPal had shut it down in a couple of months after the acquisition because of the data breach. And there was a big, essentially, write-off for them, a write-down, because they deemed it to be cheaper to shut it down than to deal with the ongoing issues with the breach that it cost. What other things is average cost of breach is going up, and even though it sounds like, oh, that's so expensive, $150, we have 50,000 records, do the math. That's what that cost combines is all of the fallouts that companies can expect. Yes, definitely a smaller company, startup like us, we will not have a $20, $30, $50 million fines. But what we might expect is a churn of a customer or a number of customers, especially if you have a contractual clause to notify your customers, especially B2B enterprise customers, that you had a breach, and they have clause in the contract to terminate the agreement and walk away for those reasons. So that also can be really expensive. And imagine if you're a startup or you have 10 customers, each one is paying you 50, 100K. I don't know what your price points are, but if all of a sudden you lose half of them because of a breach and they walk away, how does it look on your balance sheet? How does it look in your SaaS metrics? How do you talk to your board members? How do you talk to your investors? How do you justify that? Like it can have a fallout effect that has some not a desirable effect, to say at least. What had also changed from a cybersecurity point of view and privacy is traditionally attacks have been centered around how secure your organization is. You have proper protection, how safe or properly configured your AWS instances are, how protected you are from your web app, your website's point of view. But now they're looking at increasingly the third-party tools and third-party suppliers. So who are the suppliers? Google Tag Manager is a supplier. Who uses Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics on a website or web app? Only a few hands, surprised. But from our experience, everyone, like with a few exceptions, everyone has a Google Tag Manager or GA, and often they don't even know that they might have it. How many of you do you think you might have Facebook or Twitter ad trackers reading your passwords when you're entering a password on a login page? Probably nobody will raise a hand, but just today I spoke with a company where every single password field on their mobile apps, on their web apps, is being read by Facebook tracker. It's not sending the data out, but it's actually reading it. So that's one of the challenges that often we as kind of technical people, we want to grow the business, we want to grow develop our app, but we don't realize the things that marketing tools or customer success tools or chatbot tools or support tools that they're introducing, that they could be exposing us to things that we're not even realizing that they're there. This is very obvious. In my mind, almost everything is preventable unless it's a zero-day exploit. However, even zero-day exploits can be prevented by better engineering or better limiting or reducing the surface area of the attack for the company. Not completely mitigated, but reduced. And this is an alarming stat, is 4 out of 5 are expected to deal with some sort of an attack. And frankly speaking, everyone is being attacked at any point of time, we just don't know it. So interesting is that 20% of companies don't expect. That's interesting. And another kind of stat that can be added to this, there's a joke in cybersecurity privacy kind of world being 99% secure, meaning that just one breach kind of eliminates the need for the entire 99% of security. If you have a breach, you're not safe or you're not secure, and you would need to deal with the consequences. Consequences could be mitigated through an insurance policy. You know, let's have our insurance, cyber coverage cover us. Yes, true, it will help mitigate the immediate fallout, but it will not mitigate the brand reputation, especially in the cases when a company is in a sales process and the buyer is down to maybe one or two companies that they're kind of vetting, and they start info security review and ask a question: have you been breached? And give us the records of proof of your recent breaches. And one company pulls up a list and gives them a list of all the breaches they had, even the last month, and another one is safe, and they said we didn't have any breaches. So think about the clean record. Which one will be more appealing to the buyer, especially to the info security team? And also another area that we've noticed happening during B2B procurement process is when the procurement department or info security departments ask, do you have a breach? Yes, and they start looking deeper into that breach. And also the type of a breach, type of an infraction, type of the issue they had, it gives them a better view of the culture of their organization. What's the culture of the company? What's the culture of the startup? What can they expect moving forward? So that's a good indicator for them as well. By the way, out of us, we have about 50, 60 people in the room. How many are also dealing with sales? So not just product and data, but also interact with sales or influence sales. Yeah, some hands go up. Okay. So that's where really important to always consider how does security and privacy compliance and things that we do when we handle data, not just for business, but for safety point of view, how does it impact our sales and our growth? Because if we don't operate a company in a mature, robust way, even though we might be doing shortcuts now, they will have a good payout later that we may not want to deal with. Okay, and last but not least, obviously boards are getting a lot more involved now. In some jurisdictions, there's increased scrutiny, and sometimes there's also, from privacy point of view, liability either are or they want to assign or put it the part of the fiduciary liabilities to the board members and officers. Sometimes boards are, or there are a couple of notions in the US to put some personal responsibility for board members to have even security and privacy training or background or somebody from that field to be present on the board to help companies protect and have a lot more mature oversight of their data practice. So we're done with all the negatives and consequences. Now moving into the positives. Where is it all coming from? Why is a number of supply chain attacks? Why is the number of privacy violations or cybersecurity challenges increases? Not just failures, but just challenges. It's because of the explosion of SaaS tools and popularity and how easy it is to get something off the shelf, ready, plug into your app, plug into your mobile app, web app, or website, and just start realizing the value. Many of us have seen that screenshot, right? Have you seen this before? Oh, no. Oh, I'm surprised. Surprised from the way, this is a very quickly developing market where from 150 companies selling sales and marketing tools in 2011, it went up to over 7,000 last year. So that's the magnitude of the change of how many tools are there and how many tools we're actually using that we don't realize. A typical enterprise has at least 121 or more than 120 third-party tools that they use in their digital kind of customer experience on their front-facing site. Startups like us, we don't use as many. From our study, we've done a 2-month study that we released in June. We found on average around 20 third-party tools that are present on a website. or public customer-facing website. In most cases, all of those tools have direct access to credentials. They can see passwords in clear text. We just don't realize that they can. Often they're actually reading passwords. Many ad trackers are reading email and usernames and send them over to the mothership, to the company, so that's how they're building their huge databases of emails that are accurate and up to date. If you're buying any email lists, if your marketing or sales team buys a mailing list from a company that claims to be 95, 99% accurate, that's one of the reasons why, because they scraped all those emails over the last recent days and weeks, because people are using them. And that's how it's part of the marketing side and business development connects to the privacy or security compliance side, is because there's so many tools out there. So many tools have access to things they should not be able to access or don't really need to have access to. That's why it's creating that rise in form jacking attacks, scheming attacks, all kinds of attacks that unfortunately we often don't even know are happening. Just this Monday, I was speaking with a company. They operate, it's a fairly large, mid-sized organization. They operate 30 businesses. Out of 30 businesses, 17 have e-commerce checkout. Basically, you can go to their website and purchase something with a credit card. One of those was breached, basically a scheming attack, and we'll dive into what the scheming attack is. The funny part for them, which was not too funny, is that it took them 11 months to detect. So all of their customer data, credit card information, payment information was being sent somewhere else for 11 months without them even knowing that it is happening. It's an interesting analogy would be it's imagining a company in like a retail store that have super safe and secure tracking and logistics infrastructure. They can bring all the goods into the store. They put all the shelves stocked up with all the great bags and stuff that they sell. But they have absolutely no oversight that somebody comes in, grabs it, and walks away from the front door, and a retail store would not even know that it has been happening for 11 months. So that's one of the dangers of the scheming approach. And MageCard. Anyone heard of MageCard? So I see a couple of heads nodding, but one head nodding, and others are actually not nodding. What MageCard? It's becoming a little bit more of almost like an urban legend, but it's more of a syndicate of hackers or criminal organizations that attack organizations, steal data, resell data, make millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars on it. However, they don't have a single entity. There is no oversight. It's just a group of criminal organizations that target commercial entities to steal their payment information and other valuable data that they can monetize quickly. So let's dive a little bit more into what is a scheming attack. Have anyone heard the word scheming attack before? Okay, a couple of hands, one hand. Anyone heard form jacking? Yeah, same, okay, even a few more hands. So it's very, very simple. If when we look at, like from our company point of view, when we develop our product, we actually looked, okay, ironically everyone is Russian speaking in the development side, so and that's why you might be wondering, why is a guy named Ivan talking about cybersecurity? We're not hackers, we don't hack. But we looked at, okay, if we were to hack, how would we hack? And then our product people would look up and say, okay, well, this tool actually can see credit card information. So, hey, look, if I just inject 2 lines of code into this script, it will send me a copy of the credit card information. And that was that simple. So the other way would be, how do we now inject that a couple of lines of code into that third-party script? We could go, we would be like somebody or an attacker would try to hack into a company like British Airways, which somebody had successfully done, or go to a little startup or some kind of startup that their tool is actually running on that login page or payment page. Inject 2 lines of code, and in seconds you start getting copies of the credit card information. That's how simple it is from the steps. It may not be super easy, but it's pretty simple, and a sophisticated person can do it 4,800 times a month. That's an average number of successful scheming attacks that are being detected every month now. That was a significant increase from even last year. So what essentially happens, a few lines of code are injected, your credit card information is being, or your customer credit card information is being sent out, and then one day somebody calls you from a company. There's a number of cybersecurity research firms, and they tell you, I think your site was hacked. I was just looking at it, and I noticed some abnormalities. You should take a look. And that's how many hacks actually have been discovered when a security researcher from somewhere else goes out, does his research, and then tells a company that you've been hacked, and you don't even know for how long. And that introduces that interesting challenge of attention. Business, sales, marketing, directors, investors, everyone wants company to grow fast and forward. We want results. We want growth. We want monthly recurring revenue to grow. We want demand gen campaigns to work as quickly as possible. We want conversions. That's what everyone wants. When cybersecurity or privacy people hear that, it's basically what they say, well, we can do all that, but at what cost? So it creates this disbalance and this pressure. One side of the organization wants to get results, and another one needs to try to balance it out, at least to catch some of the balls in the air to mitigate the issues or mitigate likeliness of a breach. And that's where people who are handling data and people who are responsible for data, when data can include visitor data, login credentials, behavior data, in-product analytics data, they need to consider what's the proper way, how do we know how many efforts, how much resources should we put into securing certain assets of the organization. So, and it starts actually as something called anticipatory budgeting or risk assessments, where they look at, okay, how much is this crown jewel worth? So what are our crown jewels to begin with? What is the data worth? So, and what is it worth? There's a couple of ways to look at it. What is it worth if we get breached? What will be the fallout? And the fallout that needs to be documented and projected. Will it be penalties? Will it be loss of customers, loss of churn of customers? There was a case, when was it? In this spring in Toronto, one company, a bigger startup, acquired a smaller startup. One of their servers turned out to have malware. It was infected with the malware, and essentially, once they brought that server into their environment, that malware waited for some time, and then all of a sudden it encrypted a bunch of other servers, and they could not get their customers to use their software, and they realized it had been hit with a ransomware attack. Anyone heard of ransomware? A couple of hands. So what ransomware attack is, just in 30 seconds, you come to the office, you open your computer, and it tells you you need to pay a certain amount of bitcoins to keep using that computer. And until you pay, you don't get back your computer. And then you turn to your coworkers, and your coworkers turn to you because they also see the same message. Another scenario is your computer is working fine, but your servers are encrypted and they don't work. And you basically have a choice, either pay out, get the code to decrypt your servers and then deal with it later, or go back and backups and try to restore as if it was before. Find the time when it was infected, restore it to the prior date, and basically suffer the consequences of lost data in that time. So that's a type of a ransomware attack that has effect on people. And it is its third scenario. So your servers are encrypted. You now need to pick up the phone, tell people that maybe payroll will be infected, maybe customers will be impacted, maybe you have to call your top suppliers and top customers, tell them that we've been hit, and you have to wait until your application, for example, is down. You have to wait until it's restored. And imagine what kind of impact that might have. In that case, actually, a couple of top automobile manufacturers basically walked away. They invoked some of the clause, termination clause, and walked away. And it costed them not just the insurance coverage, not just a way to cover the bill to mitigate and sanitize their environment, but also loss in revenue. So that's really comes to the point of understanding what are the suppliers, what are the tools that are handling the data, what are the crown jewels around those tools, and what is the anticipatory, what's the anticipation, how much would it cost you if those crown jewels were stolen or breached, and what it will take you to bring business back online. By the way, did anyone have to deal with a breach here before? Okay. It's a very sensitive topic. If somebody doesn't mind to kind of give a hint what kind of breach, or feel free to share it. I see a lot of heads not wanting to share, which is expected. No expectation, that's okay. So now we're going from third-party kind of overview of marketing tools to how does it actually look from the back, from behind the scenes. What are the back doors? What are the signs and symptoms to watch out that customer data might be at risk or might be already being breached? So this is a typical example of a login page. Standard kind of looks, just enter your username and password. That's how it looks from the front. If you wanted to hack it, it actually doesn't look like that. It looks like there's a bunch of tools there's probably a chatbot, there's probably your CRM integrated to it, there's probably email validation system integrated into it, there's probably your advertising trackers are also on the page, and they load a bunch of JavaScripts that you don't have any control over, that somebody else can change that code on a minute's notice without you ever realizing that it's being changed at any given time. And that's the typical scenario for scheming a password, for an account takeover attack. With an account takeover attack, one of the examples is, why bother stealing credit card information and risking credit card being declined, transaction being declined, when I can just take over the account, and whether it's make a transaction or purchase from within that account, or change that account to make it my own. Maybe there's some digital goods in it, and exploit account takeover attack. Payment information is second, or actually from scheming attack, payment information, the number one target of attack, and user account information is number two. And payment information is the same. You think you're entering your payment information on a clean page. There's lots of tools. There's actually I'm not going to share any names to protect the innocence or confidentiality, but there are companies and retail stores here in Canada that I will never buy anything from. I'm even afraid to pull up my credit card when it's on the screen, because there's so much stuff happening on that payment page. And sometimes even speak with the security team there, and they're like, okay, that's fine. It doesn't matter. It's like, okay, I'll wait to read something in the Globe or hear about you on CBC. Like, okay, let's talk later. But that's the realization that there's so much happening behind that clean payment page that might be causing companies to go at risk. Actually, now a good example, I was speaking with the CISO of a very, very famous, very big file sharing company. Everyone knows that name. And he said, it took us 2 years to clean it. We know about this problem. It took us 2 years to clean up all the things that had to be present, that were present on those sensitive pages before we cleaned them up. And essentially where the state is now is absolutely nobody, nothing can touch their credentials or their customer data because of the risks. If they would get breached the way British Airways would get breached, they would lose a lot more than just $230 million. They would lose their reputation, they would lose their B2B customers, they might lose their B2C customers as well, but it would be significant cost to that organization. And moving towards culture. We had the culture, and my first company especially, we had that culture. Maybe it even has a little bit resembles of it because it takes a lot years to fix it. And the culture is, let's get all the data we can and figure out what to do with it sometime in the future. Is anyone guilty of that? Basically, what we wanted to do, let's gather everything possible. And if we ever need to use it, monetize it, we will. And if we don't, like it's so cheap to store it, it's insignificant on our balance sheet. However, the challenge here is that we create, with that culture, we create a culture of ignorance, culture of not sufficient or insufficient diligence on handling the privacy or security concerns around marketing. So when marketing is driving outbound leads, driving outbound campaigns or inbound demand gen, they're gathering all the behavior data to try to predict the conversion rates. There's lots of data that is shared and stored in many systems, whether it's in our own AWS instances or in third-party hands. But essentially, that data has zero oversight, zero security or privacy oversight, and it can't, when it is schemed or when it is stolen or when it is misused, it could trigger some negative consequences. But probably marketing data, except for if you're actively targeting European markets, may not be as damaging to the organization as customer or payment information. Did anyone hear about penalty under GDPR, about 200,000 euros that was announced a few months ago to a company that basically bought a list or gathered a list of people, basically a huge list of people that did not have proper legal basis to store their information, and they got a slam with a 200,000 penalty. Okay. Should I jump a little bit, explain what it is? Okay, lots of nodding heads. So, essentially, if you're in the B2B business or B2C in that sense, list building is a big practice. What we want to do is build a list of targets who we want to prospect or market to, and then reach out, run campaigns one way or another. Under GDPR, the way regulators looked at it is you need to have, or they deem that organizations need to have legal basis to have someone's record. And what is a legal basis? There's 6 under GDPR. One of them is consent, another one is legitimate basis. So basically if you're, and it's a kind of shady area, like shaky ground. It's sometimes hard to justify a legal basis, lawful basis. But what it means is if I know, for example, if I can identify an individual through a couple of records, could be an email, could be first and last name and a company name or title, or an email address to be specific, it's deemed to be an identifiable piece of information. And then I need to have, as a company, lawful basis. Why? And if I don't have lawful basis, I cannot have that data. And in that penalty, what it meant, the way regulators interpret it, company built a list of people, records about people, but they had no lawful basis to store that information. And under GDPR, you have 30 days to either get lawful basis or destroy the data.
What is the local basis? What is the local basis?
Yeah, so there's 6. The most common 2 that are applicable to businesses is either, actually 3. There's consent, so somebody consented to give you. There are contractual obligations, and there's also legitimate reasons. So, for example, if you are, let's say, you're a VP of marketing, and I sell marketing software, and I assume that you might have the problem that I'm solving, then this is the gray area. There is a way that I can communicate to you. Let's say your name is John Smith. Hey, John Smith, you're VP of marketing at company X. Those kind of companies usually have problems. Why? Like why X, Y, Z. And we solve those problems. Do you want to talk about that problem? So that might, if it's relevant to you, if you feel that it's tailored to you, if it's applicable to you, then that might be a good way to justify that you had actually a good basis to connect with you. However, if I'm selling, let's say, developers' tools and your VP of marketing and it's completely irrelevant to you, then those clauses or those bases will not apply to you. But talk to your lawyer. Talk to your lawyer and privacy consultants. I'm not a lawyer, full disclosure. So looking at this, the problem here in this model, and that's how most of the organizations operate, is marketing folks, they want to do what they want to do, and then security, compliance, and audit, they don't even have a controls over it. Usually companies under 50, they don't even know what needs to be done, and they generally don't even have anyone that oversees practice, their privacy practice or security practices in sales and marketing. Does it sound familiar? Raise your hand if you have anyone overseeing privacy in your marketing. That's what I'm expecting. Customer service, that's where it gets a little bit more sensitive because it's actual customer data now, not just marketing data. And it becomes more desirable to attackers because there might be some sensitive data, there might be health, financial records, login credentials, there could be payment information. So the data is more desirable. So that's why it's getting a little bit more sensitive because there's more people might be looking at it. More people might want to get their hands on it because they can sell and resell and monetize their data. Going to finance and the back office, HR, payroll, this is where actually most of the large organizations' breaches happen, and many of them, before the breach notification obligations came into effect, were not as publicized as breaches today. But there's lots of wealth, big wealth of information that companies store about their employees, social security numbers, social insurance numbers, health, financial, payroll, all kinds of records that are highly desirable to get, for identity theft, for all kinds of malicious reasons that criminals would want that data for. And there's lots of that data. So that's, especially in the smaller size companies, all of those functions, they operate in silos, usually without no or very little security oversight. And security oversight, typically, from my experience, what I've seen, ends at, do you have passwords? Do you have two-factor authentication? And if you do, let's move on and let's not worry about it until something happens. In the simplified actually model, what we're seeing is some companies from startup community, tech startups, from about 50 to about 200, 250 employees in size, they start introducing either a security engineer or somebody that oversees security or security officer. If they sell to Europe, they sometimes might have a data protection officer that is mandated in some instances for them to have somebody on staff in that role. What they start doing is they start actually looking holistically. Why do we need to bother? Why do we need to spend all the cost on managing marketing, sales, customer success, IT, finance, payroll, security in silos, when we can look at it holistically? How does the data flow and to introduce the controls and the functions and audit of those controls and functions holistically? So if we use, here's an example, if we use one CRM for all of the sales, marketing, customer success, but some of that data needs to be exported into a bucket and then into your own database or into an Excel file. So this is actually now, if you exported the data into two locations, in some cases now you have to notify your customers that your data moved from US or to Canada, or if you have servers hosted in other jurisdictions, if you sell to B2B organizations, you have to notify them that copy of the data is now crossing the borders. And overseeing the cross-border transfers becomes an issue for some organizations. So it's why bother doing it separately for all the silos rather than just simplifying the operation of privacy and security across all of them. I have somebody that has an oversight, has a clear view of the entire data collection from end to end, from leads to customers, to value, to sales, to upsells, to revenue, and then to destruction of the data when it needs to be. So it can be kept as safe and as protected as possible, and also as much as resources that company can allocate to protecting the data. Okay. I know we have 5 or so, 10 minutes for questions. And Vladimir, did you? Yeah, let's transition with that to questions. Yes.
Sorry, so I'm just going to pass the catch box so that everyone on the live stream can hear you as well.
Ivan, really good presentation and timely. Be really curious about your thoughts on the recent Capital One credit card breach.
Yeah, it's we actually had quite a few discussions on that. It's my thoughts are, so first of all, Capital One was one of the first, if not the first, enterprise that really went through pioneered the digital transformation. So they've done a lot of things that many other organizations have not even done yet. That's first thought and first observation. So they're kind of pioneers. An issue can be expected of, a pioneer can expect issues to come out from the things that they're doing that they have not been done before. And one of them is deploying AWS, for example, and moving from on-prem to cloud sooner than others. The issue specifically from technical point of view from that breach is kind of odd, to be honest. If you look at the security compliance and there's audits and controls, so it's whatever you need to do, you need to know what needs to be done, you need to do this, and then somebody else needs to verify that it is being done. And unfortunately, that's the reality of the security world. Can that breach be prevented? I think personally it falls into that 95% of all the breaches can be prevented, and into that statistics. So from my point of view, there was an interesting, I think over time there will be more story coming out, because the behavior of that engineer was very interesting, uncommon, I would say. There's an anomaly of that decision-making process, get the data, talk about the data, and then kind of, I feel that there will be more coming about that, more news. But it should have been or can be preventable from what we know. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Let's into the catch box. Got it?
Yeah. And then.
Well, thank you for your presentation. Generally speaking, what do you think about serverless-based application compared to traditional serverless applications?
So Solaris?
What do you think about the robustness of serverless applications compared to?
Robustness? Whew. From technical or let me look from the operating point of view, from operational point of view, like when something goes into production, let's say, and security controls, we can be putting as much security as possible. However, it needs to make sense at the same time. It cannot be overly security or even practices. Security practices should not be and should not create a no culture. It should be yes, but here's how. So when you're looking from robustness point of view of actually just reminded me of the conversation we had this morning. When an organization is doing pen testing to their new deployment in the staging environment that is dedicated for pen testing. They do their standard pen testing and they find no issues, no holes, like everything is safe and secure. And that's what they think it is safe and secure. Once they deploy that code, their application from staging and goes into production, they think that they are in a state that it was in staging. What is really happening is that in staging, they had 4 third-party tools active on their web app. In production, they had more than 40 tools active because they were missing the entire surface area of attack that customer success, customer service support, payment processing, and marketing tools introduce. So they could have, in that case, they can put as much security as possible into developing application very safe, developing a very robust and secure application, but they're still opening the whole set of doors and backdoors through the vectors of attack they didn't even anticipate that are there. So I'd say from robustness point of view is looking at various angles of attacks and looking not just from inside out, but from outside in. If you were a hacker, if you wanted to hack yourself, what's the other way around you could get into that data if you didn't know what you know? Just trying to disconnect from your knowledge about your own application and look from outside in to see what are the backdoors. How can you exploit something that is there? I think there was another hand before we go. Is talking cube?
Got it.
Yeah, so there are third-party applications like Stripe,
Yeah.
where you have to go and so you talked about skimming attack
Yeah.
in the start of the presentation. What these applications, third-party applications, are doing to curb those, and are they more safer than when directly taking the credit card information to the web apps?
Yeah, so good questions. Stripe is one of the payment processors. So if you take, for example, payments through credit card information, you need to comply with obligations under PCI. There's different levels of PCI compliance. So Stripe is actually what we've noticed is really, so companies that take payments through Stripe specifically tend to have almost no or very few tools that can access those payment information. That's just the way Stripe requirements for merchants are. And but many others, when they don't use a processor like Stripe, or not to make it a commercial about Stripe, when they often have dozens of third-party tools accessing that payment information. Ironically, actually, on August 1st, PCI Security Council, does anyone know what PCI is? Just one or two hands. So PCI is basically it's an organization put together by credit card company, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and they oversee the payment process through credit cards. So if you take credit card payments, one way or another, you need to comply with PCI obligations. On August 1st, they issued a security bulletin alert about Mage card attacks rising, and they've put a specific bulletin to highlight the risks and typical vectors of attack and how difficult it is to detect. Everyone encouraged, if you take credit card payment, Google PCI security alert from August 1st, and we can even include a link in a follow-up, that you need to do what they are requiring or suggesting to do. Yeah.
A lot of your talk has been focused on identifying and preventing attacks into the company from outside. Have you given any thought to attacks that are basically using my system, your system, as a Trojan to get into somebody else's system?
So as a vector to get into somebody else? Okay. And so inside-out attack or inside job can be done through a technology tool. There was actually Palo Alto. There was a big alert on Palo Alto vulnerabilities in their network and VPN that was leading exactly to that, where an attacker could gain access into someone's environment through holes in Palo Alto equipment. I think it has been patched, but there was a big alert on that topic. And a second example is actually social engineering. And did anyone hear about AT&T news a couple of weeks ago? Essentially, I think it was two people who've been actually charged and I think they're facing jail time. They've been bribed by somebody to give access to AT&T system, and that entity installed malware to unlock phones. So if you buy a phone from AT&T, they would unlock it through the malware, and it was completely, so it would record keystrokes, would automate all of the things that agents would do to unlock a phone, and that's basically their business model was. So they used a bribe to get as a vector into an environment, installed malware that would record keystrokes and activities of employees and would be unlocking the phones. So it is definitely happening. It is definitely one of the major vectors of attacks. And the simplest one, and I know we're out of time, is actually Bluetooth sticks. Don't pick up a Bluetooth, or sorry, a USB stick that you found on somewhere in the parking lot and never put it into your computer. You won't believe what will happen without you even realizing that it happened. Yeah.
Any more questions from the audience? Thank you.
What are your thoughts on password managers like LastPass?
Whew. That's a big debate. It's, full disclosure, we're a LastPass customer. So we're using ourselves LastPass. And it is one of those kind of one-to-many or hub-and-spoke kind of breaches. If LastPass is, the way we look at it, if LastPass is breached, we will be breached. So we would rush to change the passwords. However, we would need to, our passwords would be stored in multiple systems, just the variability will increase. So more systems could be breached, so more passwords, more often we might be breached ourselves. So do we use ourselves? Yes, we do. Do we believe in LastPass security or other password managers? We do believe. If they would to get breached, would we stay on them and or move to somebody else? That's exactly the topic we discussed earlier. It's it could be if they get breached, we would probably have to move to a different supplier.
So,
I think there was, oh, sorry.
Thanks. What, like, just at a very high level, so startups that are in that, like, don't have a lot of resources, understand the risks, like, what is, like, some of the simplest things that you could do before going to market that will actually prevent some of these things, or at least buy you some time?
Yeah. First, it's a chicken and egg kind of question. I'd say I'll use kind of get your shit together. Like that's the first thing, is like know what it is that you need to do. I would actually start from the step. If you're in startup, you need to get customers, you need to sell. Talk to other startups who are further along the journey. If you sell to larger entities, large enterprises, what kind of infra-security requirements do they have on their suppliers that you would need to demonstrate to your customers? So even before you go through InfoSec. So if you sell to banks, talk to somebody who sold to banks to know what you need to have. Second is visit sessions and educate yourself on practices. What are the common things that startups should be doing and should not be doing? For example, there's a check mark, like always encrypt hard drives on your laptops. They should always be encrypted. Use security policies across computers, so that it's kind of counterintuitive where everyone wants to, in a startup, have their own laptop, have their own full admin access, install whatever they want. But that's exactly how malware and keyloggers, sniffers, and all kinds of nasty things get into computers. So you visit your website, it asks you for a prompt, you say okay, enter the password, boom, here you go, you're toast in a way. So those are the get your shit together, know what to do, know how to mature, and talk to others that have done it, so that you don't have to repeat, and you know what to prepare for, and you will prepare for it. Yeah.
Can I add on that is do the things that cost little. It's configuration is no cost for startups. Hardware and other software tools, there is a cost, but you can do a lot and get a lot more secure by just making policies and configuration. Checkmarks.
For example, even us, when we're starting small startup, 5, 6, 7 people, nobody has admin access. Only two people have admin access. So when somebody needs to install something on a MacBook, they go to that person and that person will install. It introduces a friction, because you cannot install something today. You need to go and install it the next day or the week after, but it makes you a lot more safer. How are we on time?
Okay.
Good.
One last question.
Yeah. And there was one more hand over there, so after.
We've got 2 questions from online as well.
Okay.
Okay, so kind of a big question. So from a development perspective, what's your opinion on open source software? Like you use something like Angular with all these different libraries that are available online. You know, there's a lot of vulnerabilities out there. How do you protect yourself?
Yeah, very important question. Actually, our CTO, that's what he handles. What we do, our approach is, obviously we need to innovate, you need to use all of those libraries, all of the technologies available. One of the ways to actually mitigate it is to not to sideload libraries or code from third-party destinations. So instead of loading jQuery from jQuery.org, load it from your own server. Put it on your server, you control it. Basically, you introduce change control. The biggest problem, one of the biggest problems in security comes from lack of control. So you might have 30 tools or 30 scripts running on your page, but if you control of them, they're a lot more secure than if you have no control and they're controlled by 30 different companies. Yeah. There was one hand over here, or actually two hands.
Yeah, it's a related question. I mean, it's on the open source front. I mean, there's such a huge proliferation of open source. So many companies are using it. But how are you limiting? That's one thing is to have a source control, but there's still so much open source out there. The security risks in those, especially when you indicate a couple lines of code, can have dramatic impact. You know.
Yeah, so
what can you do?
There are two ways to do that. Two fundamental different approaches. One is knowledge-based, and another one is behavior-based. So knowledge-based is, there's something known, a known vulnerability, somebody scans the code, finds a hole, patch it up. Behavior-based is, you don't know that there's a problem. You don't know that there is a hole in that, in that script or library. So that's actually like 10-second sales pitch. We decided to start our company on a behavior base. So rather than trying to analyze all the code, let's analyze the behavior. What does that code do, and if it does anything malicious? So that's two different approaches. One is knowledge-based, and another one is behavior-based.
I have a question. So while 5G promises faster speed and better reliability, people worry about the potential security threats and the lack of infrastructure around the 5G network, and almost think it's faster than what we need. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
So speed and bandwidth latency will definitely have impact on, I don't think on a security per se directly, but on the number of tools and IoT and all the things that we use. I think that's more of a kind of evolutionary introduction of new challenges to security or privacy. A different set of problems might arise from actual protocol, because there's some backdoors, there's different layers. Like it's the way 5G is engineered, it might introduce a new set of challenges that we're not facing today yet. So that's where 5G. I'm actually really looking forward to learn more. I'm learning as much as possible, but also as it starts being deployed in a couple of cities in the US and in China, I want to see how that's actually played out and what are the backdoors, what are the issues that get discovered.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Some online?
Yes, so we do have two questions from the live stream there. So one question from George, and George would like to know, what is the status of using certificates instead of passwords?
Oh, what is the status? Depends on from which angle. Like certificates from this, like SSO, or from it depends on which angle. I would say it comes. I'm not an expert in identity management or authentication methodologies. However, with that said, is passwords. We went away without passwords. Actually, our own software, we decided to not have passwords, so they cannot be skimmed because we just don't have passwords. That's one less issue to worry about. Yeah.
Perfect. And the second question from Sergio. Sergio's asking, what would be your most important argument to convince companies to think about cybersecurity?
Question is anticipatory kind of cost analysis. Like, here's here's an asset. What's the value of that asset? And what's the probability of that asset being breached, and what will be the fallout, the cost of it? And then make a decision. So it's a pure business decision.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Ivan, thank you very much for offering your time and effort for presenting today and sharing your insights about security and privacy. So we've put together a token of our appreciation. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thanks to you all for coming as well, and thanks for our live audience there as well. And we really hope to see you next time. Have a great day.